The voice of the player during this offseason in college football has been evident. Even look to the Pac-12 and the document that the Pac-12 players put together that called perhaps even for revenue sharing between conferences and college football players. Joining me now to discuss what the future would look like as it pertains to pay for play for college athletes, my colleagues Jay Bilas, Greg McElroy, and Joey Galloway. Jay, we've already been well down the road in terms of name, image, and likeness, both on a governmental level and also with players pushing for it. Is name, image, and likeness enough, an unfettered limitation on name, image, and likeness, enough to make this an equitable situation for college athletes?
Equitable, no. It's a step in the right direction. I mean, really, Rece, this is a question of economic rights for athletes. And really, all the athletes are asking for is the same economic rights as literally everyone else gets in this multi-billion-dollar business. And it's not just every other employee. It's also every other student that is a non-athlete. Other students that aren't athletes get scholarships and stipends and the like, and yet they're not told what they can earn or accept. So really the issue is the amateurism restriction that the NCAA places on athletes only. And it's the athlete that bears every sacrifice. So no matter what the excuse, and they are excuses that the NCAA and all the member institutions bring up, it's always that the athlete has to make the sacrifice. Competitive balance, the athlete has to make the sacrifice. Having a full complement of sports, the athlete has to make the sacrifice. So I've never felt it was fair or right. And in fact, in a multi-billion-dollar business, when the athletes are the only ones limited, I find that profoundly wrong to the point of being immoral.
NIL, Jay, though, is, I think, an opportunity to at least get it to a point where it is somewhat equitable. You are essentially being put into a free market environment, and you'll be paid based on how much your name, image, and likeness might potentially move the needle wherever it may be, whether it's nationally, locally, or at the most micro level. Jay, the problem that I have, if there's one thing that we've recognized, you just used the term multi-billion. I feel like we hear that term a lot, multi-billion-dollar industry. If there's anything that we've learned during this hellacious coronavirus pandemic, is just how fickle and how much this entire athletic administration, that each and every one of these schools, is a bit of a house of cards. If in fact we don't have a football season, perhaps in the Big Ten, we're already seeing schools that are canceling an abundance of non-revenue and Olympic-based sports. We've already seen it happen at Iowa. We've seen it happen at Stanford, two schools that have been remarkably profitable over the last few years. So we act as though these schools are just pocketing money hand over fist. I just don't think it's the case. If anything, I think a lot of these schools are really struggling financially, and if one thing, just one little aspect, seems to go a little bit awry, then they won't be able to support the programs that they currently have and the scholarships they're currently offering.
Greg, I agree with you. And my concern in all of this conversation is I don't want these athletes to lose sight of getting their degree, because that is absolutely the most important part of them going to school. When you look at the percentages of how many of these kids will go on to play a pro sport, it's very small. And so I'm going to assume, I don't know for a fact, but I'm going to assume that the four people in this discussion have their degree. And because of we believe that getting that degree in school was very important, it has opened up many doors for us outside of playing a sport. And so when I hear about athletes getting paid and what they deserve, my main concern is if their ability to get paid, whether it's name, image, and likeness, whether it's profit sharing, whatever that may be, that takes their time and their energy and focuses it somewhere else, I hope that it does not get in the way and take place of their focus and their belief that getting their degree is the most important thing that they will do when they go to school. And so if they have an opportunity to go make $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and that gets in the way of going to class, it's not worth it at all, because that money will be gone without the education to back it to know what to do with that money. So that is my concern in this conversation, that we just get sidetracked and just start talking about their ability to earn money and not talk about the education that they should be getting and focused on.
I don't think anybody is going to come down and say that education is wrong or that that's not the most worthy pursuit. I think the question, though, comes back to why why do we decide that these things are mutually exclusive, that they can't pursue their education while still capitalizing on their marketability? And as it pertains to how money is spent within athletic departments, there are federal guidelines that they have to adhere to in terms of equality under Title IX. There are other constraints as it pertains to not necessarily turning a profit like you would for shareholders that makes it a little bit different. Jay, do you agree with my assessment? I don't see why these are mutually exclusive. You have to have one or the other.
No, that's exactly right. Money and education are not mutually exclusive. And respectfully, I think what we've heard, both Joey and Greg, interesting points, but I would refer to those as excuses. That this is a multi-billion-dollar business. College sports rakes in about $15 billion a year. And the idea somehow that it all teeters because of the pandemic, like the airline industry is in trouble. That doesn't mean that certain segments of the airline industry shouldn't be paid because the airline industry is in trouble. And what that points up, sort of that, what I would call that excuse points up, is the only one having to make a sacrifice is the athlete. Nobody's asking that other people don't get paid or have their pay limited because we're dealing with that, this pandemic, or we're dealing with other types of problems. It's always the athlete that's the only one. And amateurism does not provide anything to the athlete. Amateurism doesn't make you a better person, a better student, a better athlete. It doesn't provide anything. It just limits you. And to Joey's point, look, nobody's saying education's not important, but we could say the same thing about athletes doing a photo shoot for the school. Or any number of things that they're doing for the school. It takes their attention away from education. Like money and education are not mutually exclusive. What these are issues for individual schools to deal with. So Joey went to Ohio. If Ohio State doesn't want their athletes doing commercials, they can say, listen, we don't do that here. And then see how it works out in the marketplace. And if one school doesn't want to pay or wants to pay less than other schools, then that's fine. The marketplace will sort it out. But the idea that the athlete gets zero except for expenses because we have to pay for these other things, and because Iowa went from 24 sports to 20 and Stanford went from 36 sports down to 25, and they were cutting those 11 whether the pandemic hit or not, that should have no bearing on the athlete's economic rights. That's an individual school choice.
The reason I say that but the reason it sounds like they're mutually exclusive is because in our conversations, I don't hear Jay Bilas lead with the education is the most important part. I don't hear Rece Davis, as we're having this conversation and having this discussion, we won't discuss education at all. And here is my concern. I can agree with everything you guys say. But what I worry about is when we're talking about these young people and they're listening to these conversations and they don't hear Jay Bilas say that the education is more important. They don't hear Rece Davis say or Greg McElroy say how important that education is, and all they hear is us talk about how important their ability is to get a slice of the pie that is made by the NCAA or made by these schools. The conversation then leads them to ignore the most important part of this. And so, no, I do believe that you can do both. I get concerned when I listen to the conversations that don't address both. Because if I'm a young man and I'm sitting on my couch in college or in high school thinking about going to college, and I listen to these conversations we have, all I'm thinking about is how important it is and how can I get a slice of the pie of the money. And when you say they get zero, that says to me that, hey, the opportunity, the help, the tutors, whatever it is these schools provide, the push in that direction to get that education, to me, is way more valuable than their ability to go do a photo shoot, their ability to go sign an autograph somewhere, because in the long run, I'm not talking about 4 or 5 years down the road when that $50,000 they might earn can help them. I'm talking long road. And that's why so many athletes end up broke at the end of the day, because the eyeball is seeing money without seeing the education to handle that money. And you're absolutely right. They can do both. I just want to hear us tell them that they should do both.
Joey, I'm going to take a little bit of what you're saying and apply a little bit of what Jay's saying and see if we can somehow find a resolution. Because if there's one thing I've noticed when we get to this topic is no one ever seems to offer any way to make it feasibly happen. I feel like, well, you're either anti-pay player or you're in favor of paying the player. I think there is a way to actually use paying the player and the NIL that is inevitable. I agree with Jay. Amateurism is a farce. It's something that's dated, and it's going away, and it's likely going away as soon as 2021. So we might as well just concede defeat in that regard. NIL is coming. But is there room to potentially pay them more? I don't know. I'd love to explore that possibility. But if we're going to do it, let's do it in a way that we can make it educational. Let's teach the guys and the players about paying taxes. Let's teach the players about long-term savings and how it can affect your well-being way down the road. Let's teach them about 401k. Let's teach them about minimum wage. Let's teach them about compounding interest. All these things can be applied to where not only they're getting a little bit of a piece of the pie, and by the way, I think it's going to be a minuscule piece of the pie. I don't think anyone is going to get rich playing college football outside of maybe 1, 2, potentially at most 3 guys nationally. If it were to go on this year, I think there's only 3 guys that would have enough probably marketability to move the needle. Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence would probably be the 2 that would naturally probably draw the biggest eyeballs. But all in all, guys, I just think that there is way too much divisiveness on this topic. There is a way that we can maybe somehow come together. And if these guys are going to make, I've always suggested if we're going to do it, maybe we just pay them minimum wage, or we pay them double minimum wage, maybe $10, $12, $15, $20 an hour. Well, you're at the facility 20 hours a week during the season. That's $400 extra a week that these kids can potentially use towards some expenses that they might have either back at home or within their college experience. So I think there are ways to both use the educational aspect of earning money and at the same time finding an opportunity to create more wealth and maybe more opportunities for these people to create value for themselves.
Okay, I agree with the education. Nobody's going to argue that. Those are all really good ideas. And Joey, to your point, I absolutely believe education is the most important thing. But this is also, Greg brings up a great point about how do we do it next? Because you have to be careful what you wish for. Anyone who says that the players as a whole don't get anything, I don't think that's completely accurate. I've talked to a number of athletic directors across the country to get a feel for how this works. Basically, if a player qualifies for a Pell Grant, full cost of attendance, perhaps the off-campus stipend, depending on what he does with it, there are situations where guys can have $20,000 to $30,000 that they're getting from this. So it's not in addition to all the other amenities that they get. That said, the question is not so much about limiting them. It's about the wisdom of making them employees, which I think is not the right move. I think it would be more harmful than good. And the other is, I think, to get back to Jay's primary point, is you're putting artificial limitations on a group of people that no one else has to operate under. Is that fair, Jay?
That's exactly right. And look, the players don't have to be made into employees. The idea that if they're paid by the school, they're employees is really kind of ludicrous. Schools put on games all the time. So at those games, they have people that sell concessions and parking and they have ushers. They're not all employees of that university. They get paid for performing a service, and athletes could do the same thing. Now, to an earlier point about athletes who go bankrupt, look, I practiced in bankruptcy court as a lawyer for a long time, and I never saw an athlete in there. A lot of people go bankrupt. It's not just athletes. And the idea that somehow we're protecting athletes by not paying them, I find that kind of absurd, frankly. Look, in this country, we have tied a college education and, if you are an athlete, your pursuit of your passion, we've tied that to some sort of amateur ideal that, frankly, we don't support in any way, shape, or form for anyone else. There are countless other students that are getting full scholarships and stipends and are able to work in their chosen field while they're in school and make as much money as they can. And nobody's worried about, hey, wait a minute, what is this doing to your education, to the point that we try to stop it. We only do that with athletes. The free market is the best way to deal with this. You know how you learn about taxes and about taking care of money and all that? It's by having money. And it's odd when I think the literati of the college sports space is telling athletes, listen, you can't handle that. You need to keep your eye on the ball, and the most important thing is education. I know education is important. I graduated from college and law school. I understand it's important. But I also see a multi-billion-dollar business where the only class of person that is limited to their expenses only and told they get enough is an athlete. Everyone else can get whatever their talents can earn in the marketplace, their fair market value. And to deny it only to athletes while everybody else is making what they can, I think is wrong.
I understand all the points, and I understand what you're saying about finding ways to get these athletes money. But once again, I just don't understand the short-sighted part of that is almost like, yeah, I understand that education is important. Also, as you're sitting there and you're a lawyer and, and so you understood the importance of the education when you were in school. And honestly, it has opened so many doors for you so that if you weren't calling games or on ESPN, you have a whole nother career that is, there and it's lucrative and you can do whatever you want with that. Now, I am not saying for 1 second that you are saying that they should not get the education, but what I am saying is when I hear a lot of us talk, and Jay, you're one of these people that I do hear talk, I don't hear you say that the education is important. And it is not just, let's not make it sound like for 1 second that when we talk about this education that they are opening up the door and say, hey guys, go in there and get you one. No. There are tutors. They will walk you to class. They make sure you're in class. Things that I don't see the normal student get, they go above and beyond to make sure that they do everything they possibly can to help these young men get that education. Much more than I've seen in regular students. You're absolutely right. Regular students go get a job. Regular students they do also get, benefits and scholarships. And I've said this before, the things that athletes get that either is in training, because the training that I received while at Ohio State was better than any other training I received in my entire career, the 16 years in the NFL. So that's also a benefit. All I'm saying is this: when we have this conversation for people that have their degrees, I would love to hear those same four say, get your degree while getting money. And you're right, Rece, you can do both. I just want to hear us talk about both so that when they hear it, they understand that we are saying it is the most important part. And it doesn't matter if that thing is 10,000, 40,000, 50,000. We all know, whether you've seen a lot of people who are bankrupt who weren't athletes or seen a lot of athletes, we all know that that money is short-lived. That degree has a much longer lifespan.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said, Joey. My one pushback, and I think to both of you guys, I just remember my college experience so vividly and was so fortunate to be a part of a national championship organization at Alabama in 2009 and had guys that went on to make millions upon millions of dollars, guys that are likely going to end up in the Hall of Fame, potentially the Pro Football Hall of Fame, with 9 figures and several commas in their bank accounts. And I'll tell you this, we all get together and we all will come together, had a reunion just last year, our 10-year reunion of our national championship. It didn't matter if you were the lowest level walk-on or you were Julio Jones. Everyone, when we were in college, felt the exact same. And there's something that was really special about that. And any time, I think any of us that have been in a professional locker room or have been in a locker room where finances are a topic of conversation, that experience is jaded. And I do worry about the unintended consequences of ruining a college experience by trying to provide these guys with a little bit extra money. And that's, I think, a very reasonable ask, because if there's a situation, even with NIL, and I think NIL, like I said, is inevitable, and I support it, and I'm fully in favor of these guys using their name, image, and likeness to create opportunities for themselves. Totally support that. But I do worry about there being jealousy. I do worry about you looking to the guy next to you in the locker room on either side and saying, well, I didn't get as much money as him for that appearance. I didn't get as much money as him for that appearance. And I think that will have a negative impact on a kid's college experience. I really do. Now, is that up to me? Should it be up to me? No, which is why ultimately I support the NIL. But I do worry a little bit, Jay and Joey and Rece, you've been around enough locker rooms, about how this could have a negative impact on just the chemistry that you might have with some of your teammates, because when you're in a locker room right now, everyone's the same. But if we start to invite NIL and other aspects of pay for play, then it could change the dynamics significantly for these guys that are going through their experience.
Appreciate everybody's perspective.
Is that why you guys all played the same amount of snaps at Alabama, Greg, that you guys all played the same number of plays because you didn't want anybody to have more than another, and the walk-on quarterback played just as many snaps as you did in 2009?
Well, I still am profiting significantly more for having played at Alabama than Alabama ever profited from me. And I was a part of a national championship team. So I look at the value as being time accrued over the course of time and compounded annually, Jay, which I know you can completely understand, having played it at the wonderful institution that is Duke.
Well, the one thing I would say, great perspective from everybody, but as it pertains to the jealousy, in the immortal words of the great American philosopher Jerry Seinfeld, I'm jealous of everybody.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.